Hi, welcome back to Overheard on Social by The Go Agency, the podcast for people who want a mix of social media news, marketing tips, pop culture, and interesting chats with interesting people, but without taking itself too seriously. I'm here with my co-host, Matthew Wyatt.
Hello.
Matt, what's going on with you? Any updates on life from last week?
I'm wearing a t-shirt in Chinese, and I was hoping that you could guess what it says.
I don't speak Chinese, unfortunately, so I don't know. Does it say podcast? Yay?
Yes, it could. I think it might say podcast. It says obvious.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
I found it.
Yeah.
Updates from me.
We went to Florida recently.
We went to Florida, which was
cool.
a fantastic trip. A bit of a strange place. I think we kind of had a one experience in the conference area of Florida, and then we went to Miami for a night.
Because for context, we were there for the Influencer Marketing Show USA, which was in Hollywood, Florida. I was doing a talk with someone from Google all about YouTube marketing, and we got to be there for a few days, and it was very fun.
Really fun.
But yeah, agree. I've never been to Florida, didn't really know what to expect. But
no alligators seen.
No alligators seen, which was a shame. But we did see a woman spinning on a circus ring in a restaurant in Miami. So
it was fun.
You know. Well, today we are here to explore the question of why is 2010s-style content making a comeback?
We're talking long form stuff. Let's face it, we're tired, we're exhausted, we're burnt out from short form. And I think that we've seen this coming down the road. It's not a particularly new thing, but long form content is making a big comeback.
Yeah.
And there are many reasons for that that we will discuss.
Yeah. So to kick off, I would say the kind of dawn of like long form influencer marketing, at least from my perspective, felt like it was the Zoellas, the Fleur de Forces, those kind of 2010s vloggers. And I actually looked up before this, Zoella, who was one of the biggest beauty YouTubers. She was kind of queen of what was called like the Brit crew, I think, of these kind of YouTubers. And she posted her first video in 2009. So
that doesn't sound that long ago.
Where were you in 2009? Because I was trying to place myself then.
I was at school. Well, yeah, we were last year of school or something.
Yeah,
I
left sixth form in 2011, so I would have been like GCSE year.
Okay, yes.
Pre-social media. I mean, Facebook was around, but it wasn't the same as what we experience now, of course.
But I was uploading to YouTube at that point.
Really?
Yes.
What
were
you uploading?
Pranks where I'd run around to my school and like slide down banisters and thing.
Okay.
It was a series called Matt's Crazy Moments.
Really?
Which I still dip into every now and then. I think it's my best work.
But yeah, so obviously, you know, a very different time. What is kind of your memory as well of like the 2010s then in terms of content and how influencer marketing developed?
I think that, if I think about sort of the dawn of Facebook preceded by Bebo, we have like, it was very text-based then, I think. It was all about sort of like writing your statuses. Influencers were not on my radar for a while. And I think it sort of kickstarted with Casey Neistat on YouTube and old school vlogs. Mm-hmm. And this probably was quite a while ago.
Didn't you meet him in New York? Was it him?
Every time I go to the Go office in New York, I hang outside his studio. It's a bit weird, but there is sort of a little pilgrimage that I think content creators do. I stand by this one bench, I can see into his studio. And the last time he was there and he waved at me, I got it on camera.
Oh. Very nice. And what kind of content was he creating? Because I'm
old
not
school
massively
vlogs.
Familiar. Right.
So he was kind of the first person that I associated on the same level as like a TV personality.
Yeah.
Right? Where I'm like, oh, this person that's creating this YouTube content is what am I trying to say?
He's as famous as or at least to you, he was as meaningful and as famous as like a David Beckham in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Me and my friends watched him. We were really into it, but it was very niche. To me, it was me and my two other friends. We were the only ones that knew about him.
Yeah.
But obviously his videos were racking up hundreds of thousands of views. So it was that weird feeling of like being in a small bubble. If you said his name to someone, they probably wouldn't know who you're talking about, but they have got a big engaged global audience.
Yeah.
What about you?
Definitely.
Who was the first influencer?
So I would say, I remember, I think it would have been in university I'm trying to place where I was. I think it was quite late. It was probably my final year of uni.
Yeah.
That I remember coming across blogs and vloggers. I don't even really know how. I was following, like the likes of Zoella, Fleur de Force, Tanya Burr, Naomi Smart, like the kind of Brit pack of those old school 2010s vloggers. And then I sort of started getting into like the American ones like Jaclyn Hill. I'd say majority of it was like beauty, fashion content. So maybe that's why at uni it was kind of like, you know, how to do your makeup, how to do a smoky eye, like, and then it kind of, you fell into like watching their home lives. And then these people kind of, like you say, started to become almost like friends. And I think that's the power of influencer, that a lot of the people I were watching were girls that were only maybe a few years older than me. So you felt really like, these are almost my older sisters.
They're
teaching
contemporaries.
Me. Yeah. Then blogging as well, which actually, I maybe shouldn't tell you this, but I had a blog.
I was going to ask. I bet you did.
So in the final year of uni, I wanted to get into marketing, and I realized like I didn't really have any marketing experience. And a friend of mine had got a job, and one of the things that had helped her get that job was she had a blog. And apparently, because this was quite new at the time, this wasn't a time when people, now if you said, oh, I have a blog, people would be like, oh, great, of course you do. Bit like having a podcast now. But yeah, it was a time when like that was still a bit kind of, oh, you write a blog, and what's that, and what does that mean? And so apparently
you were seen more as a writer, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently that interview team were like quite impressed by this. So I thought, I'm going to start a blog, and I started my blog. I'm not going to say the name because you will look it up.
Come on.
I've tried to wipe it from the internet, but you know, it was fairly like it was beauty, lifestyle, and it got like, I did get some brand partnerships at the time, you know.
You've never told us this.
I started to become aware that it was like influencer marketing when I realized they were doing like paid trips, and they would go on these like branded trips. And I was like, oh, this is a thing that people are now making a career out of.
Well, I think like in the days of Vine, right, the problem with the platform is they couldn't monetize it for creators. And so a lot of these OG YouTubers and Vine creators were just there because they loved making content.
Yeah.
Like myself, I had a camera, would make silly videos with my friends. It wasn't a career.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I was going to become like a film director.
Right, yeah. It was like a stepping stone. And the same when I originally started the blog, it was a stepping stone for me to get into marketing rather than viewing it as like something that I would do as a career. And so there was blogging, there was vlogging.
Blogging and vlogging. On blogging, Julia and Julia. You seen the film?
Yeah.
Because this was about...
I love that film.
Julia, the blogger, wrote a food blog and...
About Julia Childs,
Julia
the chef.
Childs.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic film.
I love that film.
But
Nora Ephron's one of my favourite writers.
Yeah, Nora Ephron wrote the book. That old school blogging where, like, I don't think brand partnerships existed. It was just you had a hobby or a passion, you wrote about it because you wanted to express yourself. Yeah. I think there's something really quite like wholesome about the origins of blogging.
And I think what kind of grew over the 2010s is when it started. So when Zoella posted her first video back in 2009, like you say, it was not done with any intent that this was going to be a career. And it was very platform individual. So, you know, she just uploaded something to YouTube. I don't think Instagram really became a thing until about 2014, maybe around then. It's weird to think that I did my first like 3 years of uni, 2-3 years of uni without Instagram, you know, like imagine the days of not posting things to a social media account. But when I think what kind of happened over the 2010s is by sort of 2020, we were seeing influencers not only making a career, but starting to connect them across multiple platforms. So it went from like, okay, you have a YouTube channel to now you use Instagram to also drive people to that YouTube channel. You maybe start a podcast, you have a blog, like all they started to create this like ecosystem of different things. And I would say that's one thing. And the fact that social media just by the end of the 2010s had become such an integrated part of everyday life to the point where the next generation of people won't be able to remember what life was like pre-social media.
Yes, I agree with all of that. It's weird that we grew up in the gap in between and are probably like one of the only few years that had that sort of like upbringing without, but then it just came onto the scene and things have never gone back to the way they were, for better or for worse.
And podcasts finally as well, because they sort of started in...
Yeah, when did you first become aware of kind of podcasts just...
Well, I think it was also because people forget that we didn't have smartphones. Like, I know, which I know is obviously we remember that because we're in our 30s. But like, I think a lot of people, if I speak to, say, my younger cousins, they almost can't imagine that we didn't have a smartphone. So you didn't have the ability to like listen to a podcast in that way. I do remember staying over at my friend's house, and we used to have, you know, sleepovers. So this must have either been school or uni time. And her being like, oh, do you mind if I play like the Graham Norton podcast or something? I like to listen to it before I go to sleep. And I was like, sure. And I didn't really know what the concept of like a podcast was.
Yeah.
And then there was the Ricky Gervais podcast. So, but it was still, I would say podcasting was very like, it wasn't a big medium. People didn't really even know about it. And then I think once you started to own a smartphone and you got Apple Podcasts, I started to listen to like Desert Island Discs, and then it kind of grew from there, I would say.
Yeah, just it's an offshoot of radio, isn't it? I also have a sleepover story.
Oh, okay, go into that.
Predating the podcast, we would, you know, me and my friends would sleep over at one of our friends' houses, and he would religiously put on the Harry Potter audio tapes. And there was one night where it got stuck on Hagrid. It scared my friend that was staying over so much that apparently he climbed out the window and like walked home in the middle of the night at like 12. Hagrid. Anyway.
Okay.
You know.
Well,
so
great.
before podcast, we did have audio tapes.
Yes.
Cassettes.
Yeah, of course.
You know?
All of these things are just improved versions of things that existed in a way, aren't they? I mean, podcasts are kind of like radio shows. I mean, Desert Island Discs is probably now listened to more as a podcast, but it was a radio show.
Yeah.
And how do you think that has changed culture throughout 2010s and like the impact on this growing industry?
It's such a big question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the world is just fundamentally different living in this kind of social sphere that we do, where you have creators not existing, like you said, on just one platform, but it's like an ecosystem, just the amount of work that goes into it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I suppose it's about the connections that you make with these creators now are much stronger, and you feel like you kind of have a view into sort of different facets of their life.
Yeah. And it's become now, you know, by, I would say, GOAT was started in 2015. So that's when people had realized that this was like a burgeoning industry. By the end of the 2010s, we've got this fully fledged influencer marketing industry, the idea of creators. And I would say it was still YouTube, that kind of longer form. Pandemic hits in 2020 and TikTok takes off. Why do you think, what was the shift that brought about in terms of the content that people were consuming? And why did TikTok specifically have such an impact?
TikTok, you're testing my knowledge. Did TikTok really, it changed from Musical.ly just pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah, like it was already growing, but it was very much, I would say, it was like a music discovery platform. And, and then you started getting people doing like these dances and sharing songs and things. But I would say, I think I became aware of TikTok in the first lockdown in 2020, like fully aware of it. And I think I downloaded it then. And I would say that's when the majority of people became aware of and or downloaded TikTok.
I think the reason that it popped off so quickly was due to the fact that we were all inside, and it was like gap in the market. Instagram was obviously not quite serving people in the way that TikTok did. And I think just allowing those like fun trends and dances to kind of capture people's attention and time. People found it fun. I don't know. It had that rapid growth in the first 2 years, but it was kind of seen as an uncool platform. And I had it downloaded because at GOAT, we were kind of doing a bit of work with them. They would come into the office. So we had a bit of a professional relationship, but I still remember being a bit embarrassed that it was on my phone.
Yeah.
Cut to now where like it's ubiquitous.
Part of culture.
You know, TikTok is almost, well, it's the most popular social platform now, right?
Well, I would say, the first lockdown, what I remember of TikTok was it being a bit cringe. It was kind of people doing like lip syncing, skits, little dances. And I guess that was a way for people to feel connected to each other as part of these big viral trends when we were so physically separate. But I find it interesting that at a time when you would think people have more time than ever to be consuming longer form podcasts and YouTube videos, that short form video took off at that time.
Yeah.
And podcasts, I think, also took off during the pandemic. So you've got these people listening to like longer form podcasts, but then you've also got people spending hours on like a short form video piece. Do you think it's because people were like overwhelmed and mentally, and TikTok offered this like brain rot escape?
I do think now that our brains have fundamentally been like rewired by social media short form content. It is kind of crazy. Maybe this whole social experiment of social media platforms emerging, content becoming these like really condensed pockets of like 6 seconds in some instances. I think that we've just got so used to that like scroll, 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 consume nugget of that our attention spans have been reduced through habit. But what is a long form piece of content? Like it's not it's a subjective thing, right?
That's actually a good point that maybe we should say. What would you consider is, how would you categorize long form content, creator content? And when you think of 2010 style content, I know we just described it, but like, what do people mean by that?
I think it's more like you sit down like maybe with a meal and you're watching someone's day over like 10, 15, 20 minutes. For me, that's definitely long form content.
For me, it's over 10 minutes. I don't know why.
I think short form content for me is up to 5. Long form, anything 5 and above.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 minutes is not a long duration to sit and watch something.
I guess 5, because I guess a lot of blogs would be, you can read it in 5 minutes.
Okay.
So yeah, I would actually agree. Maybe 5 minutes plus is considered long form, which is kind of crazy to think that more than 5 minutes is like what we would consider to be long form content now.
Well, imagine telling your grandparents that like, anything above 15 seconds you'd consider to be like, a bit arduous.
Yeah.
They'd still be looking for their reading glasses. Like, I kind of like, I bemoan the fact that we have got to that point where like engaging with something over a couple of minutes is like hard work for us.
Yeah. Do you think that's true though? Because we see a lot about this of, long form was dead for a while. And I think from working in the industry, it was crazy to see how from about 2020, brands just were like all in on TikTok short form video. That was where all the investment, all the budget was going. But do you think that we ever actually really stopped watching long form content as much as people say? Or do you think that it was just like short form and TikTok was the new shiny thing and Instagram Reels were the new shiny thing?
I think it's that.
Yeah.
I think that we made up for the lack of long form content by just watching more short form content. And I think we've got to a point where we do just feel burnt out with that sort of doom scroll habit. And I think that the shift back to long form is like, if we're going to consume content every day and be on our screens, we need to be selecting the creators more carefully and probably watching stuff sort of over an elongated period of time rather than sat there for 20 minutes, watching 1,000 videos. Yeah.
So before we go slightly into that wider cultural impact and context, let's go through a few of the actual longer form 2010 style content that everyone is saying is back and what actually those are.
Yeah.
So, okay, YouTube. Where are we at with YouTube long form content today, would you say?
I would say we've got to a point where YouTube creators, top tier, are like almost creating TV, traditional media style level of production.
Yeah.
Where they're like, TV shows for YouTube. You got the likes of Mr. Beast. Kids and younger audiences are just using it as a replacement for TV. And this is something that I get really confused about. Who watches TV anymore? I don't know if I would know how to turn on a TV.
Do you watch streaming platforms though, Netflix and things? Yes, but in terrestrial TV.
If you came over and said put on BBC Two on your TV,
I think our TV is only a smart TV in terms of it doesn't actually get terrestrial TV.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know how to.
But YouTube, I think, is that creators becoming media empires, having their own sort of chicken shop day. Mm-hmm. It's just replaced the old habits of watching TV shows.
Yeah, and I think that's where also I thought that it was very interesting, like this idea that Gen Z don't have an attention span and that they only want 10-second clips of TikToks. That's where I think that this has been debunked completely, because like Hot Ones is one of the most popular interviews on in the world now, I would say. It's
Yeah.
if you look at most Gen Z people, they have probably watched Hot Ones. They've probably not watched a late night show with, Jimmy Fallon. And and Hot Ones is like 30 minutes an interview, and it's just two people sitting at either end of a table having an in-depth conversation, a bit like we're doing now, while eating chicken wings.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, clearly they are engaged enough to be watching stuff like that. It's just that I think YouTube has given us the ability to have such a niche interest that we're able to watch exactly what we're interested in, and we don't have to sit down and watch whatever is on the TV.
I also think we have to acknowledge that the viewing habits have changed. We used to kind of talk critically about second screening or third screening. Like, how can you be watching something but distracted by your phone? Like, that's just what people do now. And I think, again, our brains have rewired to be able to focus on both.
Mm-hmm.
We can be checking our emails and watching Hot Ones at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think people are more used to putting something on almost in the background as well.
Yeah. So do you think brands should be focusing more, if partnering with creators on YouTube now? And how do you think those partnerships have changed now versus like in 2015?
Fuck, I don't know the answer to that.
I think, yeah, it's probably, I would
Isn't
say...
it yes.
Well, I would say that both are a mix. I think it's interesting that TikTok is also increasingly doing more longer form content. It goes up to like 10 minutes now, right? I think brands need to look at where the nexus is between what they can speak about and what they have kind of an alignment with and what their audiences are really interested in, and then finding those creators that speak to that. And I've spoken about in a talk before around speak to on YouTube your fans, your enthusiasts, and the culture. So think of like your content in buckets and how you can partner with creators in those three different aspects. So for example, we worked with like a bunch of different influencers for our World of Warcraft campaign. And even though it was a gaming campaign, we partnered with creators from loads of different types of genres who were able to bring like their own unique spin, but still talk about the brand, you know?
Yeah. I mean, from a brand's perspective, it's like so fantastic that you can do this.
Yeah. Okay. What about blogging? Is that coming, or Substack/blogging? Because I know Substack's kind of a newsletter. Newsletters are making a comeback, but I sort of see them a little bit similar to blogging in a way.
Blogging. I was not a blogger,
Mm-hmm.
but the Substack thing I do find interesting. And having done a bit of research for this, like it is a fantastic opportunity for brands to do something a little bit different. Did you see Hinge did their love letters?
Yeah. So they hired journalists and creators to write about like love stories or dating stories that they had. And they published it as like a short form series of content, like a sort of short article form series of content
On Substack.
But then they also connected it with Out of Home because they did like physical versions and left them in bookshops and left them on like subway stations and things like that so that people could find them and read these stories.
I think that is such a clever, it might not reach loads of people, but like for a sort of a cynic like me that doesn't want to be overly sold to, I saw that and was like, oh no, they're like trying something different here. And like it certainly piqued my interest in, I would read some of those stories. I don't know if I can get my hands on a physical book, but like both of those things I thought really creative, quite different.
Do you think that the art of like the written word is coming back where people, I really think there's been a shift between people wanting like, you know, we did start to see a bit of influencer backlash, I think, back in a couple of years ago, where I think people were a little sick of these like influencers who'd built this huge career and huge fortune on kind of doing some viral dances on TikTok. No shade to them. Good for you. And that was a moment in time where that was, you know, that was a thing. But I think people have started to now be like, we actually want talented people again. We want like credible people that can write, people that can create cool content, people that have an opinion, that have something interesting to say.
Yeah.
Someone who I love who does short form on TikTok, but also long form on YouTube, the Swiftologist. So he started as like he's a big Taylor Swift fan. So he started as doing, far bigger. Like he knows everything about her. And he started of doing these videos, like reviewing her songs, reviewing her albums, but also analyzing, I guess, her career and her story. And now he's expanded into like just general pop culture and reviewing albums as well, because he's a big music fan. And the level of detail that he goes into in his videos, which will normally be like 10-15 minutes long on YouTube, and it's just him, say, reviewing the new Lady Gaga album. But it's not just like, oh yeah, this is like, I like the sort of reaction videos we see on TikTok of people like just screaming to a song where they're like, he goes into such detail of,
you're learning stuff.
Yeah, what she's used, the history of Lady Gaga, why she's made these creative decisions, why she's made these musical decisions. And I think people are really enjoying that again, people who actually have something to say.
It's a bit of a, like, it's a weird thing. The democratization of social media, anyone can be a creator, fantastic. There are so many talented people that probably in generations past wouldn't have been able to express themselves. Now they can. But it has also become a bit oversaturated. And I think that what you're talking about is like bringing the experts and the masters of their craft back to the sort of, to spotlight those people.
Yeah.
With creators that have Substacks, they're kind of I see them as the tastemakers of our age, the people that you want to listen to their advice and their suggestions and their tips and tricks, because they kind of like know better than the rest of us.
Yeah.
They can elevate us.
Yeah, definitely. Do you follow any Substacks?
I haven't got on there yet.
Any? So I subscribe to a couple, but one that's called Starfuckers, and it's
excuse me,
it's like a pop culture kind of, you know, I don't know, new Substack, I guess, where she, I think, is part of like New York life, and she talks about celebrity, the idea of Starfuckers, you know, like people who suck up to famous people and stuff. So it's kind of pop culture, celebrity gossip, socialite gossip, and it's just quite fun.
Do you pay for it?
I don't. I have the free subscription, but I know loads of people that pay. I also know someone who I met, actually a friend of a friend, and she has her own, she's a journalist for health and wellness, and she has her own Substack, which she does very well.
Substack have roughly 30 million subscribers, 3 million being paid subscribers, which is crazy. And I would normally scoff at people subscribing to a newsletter. I sort of didn't get it before I knew anything about the platform. But then I realized that, like, if you have a niche interest, or you're someone that works in marketing that wants, you know, the tea on the industry, you'd of course pay. Running is my big thing. And if there was an elite athlete that made a Substack that was going to improve my training or just my experience of the sport, I'd probably pay.
Yeah.
It's like $5, you know?
Yeah. And I think Substack, the way it's growing, it's obviously predominantly a written platform. It's for people who want to write and send out newsletters or host their content on a kind of blog/newsletter platform. They are also incorporating, people can embed videos, audio. So there's now comment feeds. So it is becoming more of like a social networking site, which I think is interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see if they go very far down the video route, because there's often sometimes a backlash, I think, of people being like, I go to Substack because I want that written
Surely it can't
content.
morph too far away from...
Yeah, I think they should always, this is my view, should always focus still on that like written
Substack
side.
If you're listening, Shakespeare would have had a Substack. Shakespeare would not have embedded videos on his Substack. Do you think Shakespeare would have had a Substack?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah?
Would have been very popular.
Could have got a play over 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Charles Dickens used to do.
Yeah, yeah. It basically is. It's like those old serials where Charles Dickens shares Nicholas Nickleby for like 3 months. But for brands, how do you think brands can what do you think the future could be for like brand partnerships with these Substackers and bloggers now?
I was reading, interestingly, there's like no set guidelines for how brands sort of interact with creators. It's all sort of done just directly. And I'm sure that's going to change, right? And that might be the downfall of the platform, where if they get it wrong, then it kind of like, you get that sellout feeling. I think people are going there now because it's a place where trust is built and it's not overly salesy, and it's, you know, that can't get lost because that's kind of the kernel of the platform at the moment.
Yeah, I do think that is the overall challenge with longer form content, where it is quite difficult, I think, for brands to insert themselves in a way that doesn't feel kind of obvious and a bit. And I think for something like a Substack, people are subscribing for this content that they are really engaged with. And at the moment we're seeing a lot of brands, using affiliate links or like ads within Obviously, the Hinge example is a great example where they've actually done something native to the platform. I think we'll start to see more brands doing that. And I do think we'll start to see a rise of like primarily Substack creators and brands wanting to partner with them. I think the way that they do that is still a little unclear to make it, you know, how do you, and it's very obvious if you're like a food brand and you partner with a Substack creator who's a foodie to do a recipe or some content around using Marmite in there in food. But if you are a, you know, Adele, for example, how do you get in your brand without it feeling a bit icky?
But if you do, then it's like, it's going
to be a huge opportunity. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about. So I saw interestingly that the guys from Topjaw are, one of them is going to be the face of this new Amazon series where he...
Isn't it Apple?
Oh, Apple TV. Yes, sorry. So a new Apple TV series all around him following chefs looking for a Michelin star. Obviously makes total sense for their channel. I think they're incredible creators. The content they make is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you think we'll start to see more brands being like, let's actually get these creators that already create this amazing content and get them to do a series about us as a brand or partnering with us in some way as a brand and doing more of that?
I think it makes sense, right? That's where everything is going. It's not even that weird to see like this Topjaw announcement. You posted it the other day and I thought, yeah, like they've been around for quite a few years and like Jesse, the front man, he's a known entity.
Yeah.
Yeah, brands are clever to like jump on these creators and start bringing out this sort of new form of creator-led mini docuseries.
Yeah. Just
choose us, do one with us.
Yeah. Going back to what the original question was that we wanted to explore of like, why are we seeing a resurgence of this? Yeah, do you think that AI has something to do with it?
It sucks at the moment. And I think that there's already like a massive backlash to AI generated content. Do you know when you go to like Spain and they'd be like, well, this quilted tea towel was made by the people in the factory. And I'd always be like, I don't really care. Like, I can't tell the difference. It's kind of the equivalent with content now, but like we do care. We want human made video content that is clearly not an algorithm, you know, behind it.
Have you seen, so literally yesterday, actually, I covered this in our GOAT newsletter.
Bartlett.
That Stephen Bartlett has announced a new podcast called 100 CEOs, where the whole podcast is scripted, filmed, and it's all AI, right? So
is this a prank?
So I would say what this is it's a clever marketing stunt. Like, in fairness, it's a clever marketing stunt for his company to show their AI capabilities, to be like, we can create this podcast, and the podcast series covers 100 different CEOs and him telling the story of their career. But it is that question of, I think it's a great marketing stunt, but do people care and do people want that? Because for me, not only is the technology, you do listen to it and it does still sound a little bit like glitchy, but that will obviously improve. But I think the thing that people love about human-led content is the value and the effort that's gone behind it. So I do question whether people, is there kind of a backlash to all this AI capabilities and stuff that's being made with AI, and you go on TikTok and you can't figure out what's been made with AI and what hasn't. And that's why people are like, also on the flip side, going back to this content that feels very unique to people. Like, would you read a Substack if you knew that that person used AI to write it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But is that because we're millennials? Like, is it, does a 15-year-old care?
I think that's human nature to, like, it feels like you've been tricked in a way. I don't like this space that we're in now where it's like you kind of watch something and you know it's not quite right, but you kind of don't know whether what you're watching is real or fake or AI generated. AI tools, great. Like AI content, well, content that's like been made entirely by AI, no, bad.
AI to speed up processes and to get rid of the inefficiencies. Like, we probably use AI now as a team for useful things, and the manual things that no one wanted to do in the team. Like, I guess putting subtitles on things is a form of AI, isn't it? Like, nowadays, if it's kind of, if you're able to
laborious manual tasks.
Laborious manual tasks, great. Maybe even helping with research as well. But I think, yeah, there's an element of people still want to see the effort behind something, and that is where the value comes from, especially when it comes to this long form content stuff. So I think we'll see simultaneously the rise of this AI content getting better, and the more of this rise of like people looking for credible authority and human voices.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, back again to that point a little bit around the influencer saturation. Do you think there's been a little bit of a backlash as well to like people seeing, you know, creators interviewing celebrities on red carpets? I've seen a lot more people doing calls for like, let's get real journalists again.
See, I don't mind that. I haven't got a problem with a De Moldenberg on the red carpet, because I think, well, the reason they're there is to sort of bring a vibe and an energy and and their people skills, right? Both can coexist at the same time. I think it's just like picking the right, you know, events to send influencers and creators to, and then using journalists for, you know, meatier, more credible things.
Yeah. So what do you think over the next few years for creator and influencer marketing strategies that we'll start to see more of?
Definitely this push towards long form content. Like we're burnt out from short form stuff. It's oversaturated. I think we're going to see that long form content also scale up to these sort of more traditional media types like mini docuseries, like we're saying with Top Jaw. I think we've been through this long period where brands have to chase the trend cycle, jump on what's hot. That will still be important, but I think brands are now realizing that it's about partnering with creators with a sort of longer term strategy, and that type of content will also change. It will be probably less short form, more long form, stuff that engages people at a deeper level, builds trust. That might vary with the platforms that they use as well. I think YouTube is an extremely important platform, but also platforms like Substack that are, you know, a completely different medium, and they will create new creators. They will birth new creators in that space.
Yeah.
It's an extremely exciting time.
So we've explored the question around 2010s style content, why it's making a comeback, and something I just thought would be interesting to end on because it's literally happened this week, and I think it kind of signals this and speaks to the conversation we've been having. So it's a trend that creators are posting on TikTok of themselves where they share the propaganda that they are not falling for. So mainly seeing women posting this trend, and it will be them, a POV style, and then it shows kind of either societal ideals or values that they reject. So maybe that's like, you know, being skinny is all that matters, or even things like weight loss jabs, OnlyFans, like basically things that they feel they've kind of been sold as propaganda and they're not falling for it. And something I found interesting is that also in this trend they're often listing things like romanticizing trad wife lifestyles, or turning every summer into an era where we're losing our individualistic nature. So, you know, it was brat summer, now we're having a clean girl autumn, or whatever it is, demure fall. And I think that there's something where people are starting to reject this over aestheticization of everything in life, and they're putting up boundaries with the internet to kind of not want to partake in this as much. And it's interesting to me that a lot of the things that people were listing and that they're rejecting are things that were popularized by TikTok and social media.
Yeah, it's like a self-awareness that they're being duped in some cases by jumping on the bandwagon of some trend. And the lies that kind of advertising and marketing have told us for like decades, if not centuries. It's very interesting that the younger generation, I'm guessing, that are fueling this are the ones to be like, hold on a second, like this is bullshit and we don't stand for this. And this is where I think the real positive side of social media comes into effect, where like that could be a really powerful force for good, where collectively as a generation, they're trying to say, what do we stand for that is good for us as a whole? Yeah. As a society. Boom, mic drop. Gen Z, you're doing well.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, I think that's an interesting place to land on. And maybe we'll come back in a few months and see where we are. Maybe in a year, it'll be back to short form, because the world changes constantly. But I do think it's a very interesting discussion and something that brands brand marketers need to just kind of be wary of and be thinking about, and, you know, not just kind of continuing to just push out as much content as they can, being a little bit more meaningful about it and intentional.
Intentional. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Matt.